Greetings, everybody. Thank you for logging on for today's broadcast, Keys to Your Best Life. I'm your host, Maggie Cavanaugh, and today I have with me a dear friend, brother, comrade in the faith and in the recovery movement, Michael Deleon. And some of you may or may not know Michael, but if you do not know Michael after this broadcast, you're not only going to know him, but you're going to love him, and you're going to want to go follow what him and Darla are doing with Steered Straight. So, Michael, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. How's everybody doing?
I am so grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule. You know, as before the broadcast, we were talking, and, Michael spent 313 days out spreading a message of hope and trying to sound the alarm, if you will, for those that are considering drug abuse, using as drug abuse, or incarcerated as a result of drug abuse. He is very passionate about seeing the captives set free. And so you can read about him in the bio that I've placed in the broadcast, and definitely go to the website, which is steeredstraight.org, and get more information. But I'm telling you now, he's got some amazing nuggets of truth. And this is not just something that he talks about because, he went to school and he learned about it and wants to go out there and sound the alarm. Not knocking those people that do that, because there is something to be said about that. But there's a whole lot to be said about what we call experiential knowledge. And he's got 45 years of it. And so, Michael, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about where you got to founding Steered Straight and what was the motivating factors behind it?
I guess the motivation behind it is trying to make sure kids don't grow up to be me. I mean, that's really what I say. It sounds, horrible, but I don't want kids to grow up to be me, because many people who, take my path don't last. They don't end up alive. Many people who take my path don't make it. And so I don't want a kid to get on that path. I want them to grow up to become who God destined them to be, who their parents and guardians are raising them to be. My addiction to drugs and alcohol started at the age of 11. And I say it purposely that way. My experimentation didn't start. I was addicted from the very first moment, and nicotine, which is that drug that kills more people on earth than every other drug combined. People don't want to really, really address nicotine. In fact, people who get off of drugs or off of alcohol, about 80 to 90% continue to smoke cigarettes. And to me, nicotine ingestion, stimulating the brain with nicotine, is one of the largest causes of relapse in our country. And you'll very rarely will you see any discussion or study on nicotine causal factor to relapse of addiction. But nicotine, vaping, and smoking cigarettes is a massive, major contributor to relapse for addiction. But nicotine was my first drug at the age of 11, and 2 weeks later, alcohol, and I was addicted to both at the age of 11, and then marijuana came at the age of 12. Now, when I say marijuana, we're talking, 1970. So marijuana in 1970 is nothing like the marijuana is today. And the thing I also fight to educate people about is, people say, marijuana is not so bad. It's a plant. I believe in marijuana for medical purposes. They have no idea what they're talking about. Marijuana 2020, nothing like marijuana 2010, much less 1970. So I was addicted to THC marijuana when I began using it at the age of 12. 11 was nicotine and alcohol. So by 15, I'd experienced pills, 16 cocaine, 17 heroin, 19 meth, a full-blown, drug addict. And, I'm 17 and a half years in recovery from addiction. But that recovery came from 12 years of incarceration. And, there's a lot of people that talk about the war on drugs. There's a lot of people that say, tough love doesn't work. There's a lot of people that say we need to legalize drugs to solve the addiction problem. Someone just said that to me this morning. We need to do what Portugal did and legalize drugs. They solved their addiction problem. And so I asked them, have you been to Portugal? And they said, no. Well, I have a dozen times. They didn't solve their addiction problem. Plus, they didn't legalize drugs. They decriminalized personal possession of drugs. And they had a plan, a medical plan to deal with the aftermath. And they don't have the same problems and obstacles that we have in America. They don't have our pharmaceutical industry, okay? They don't have our cartels. They don't have our demand. Portugal is not America. I mean, there's pockets of America where there's a lot of Portuguese people. Portugal is not America. We don't solve our addiction problem by legalizing drugs, because the top 3 drug killers in America are all heavily regulated and fully legal: nicotine, alcohol, and prescription medication. So if you really want to talk about what drugs kill people, it's the legal, regulated drugs. Legalizing illicit drugs will not solve our problem. People aren't in prison because of drugs. People are in prison because of committing crime for drugs, under the influence of drugs, to get money for more drugs. So if you legalize drugs, you won't decrease the prison population, you will explode it.
Yes.
And so my incarceration began in 1995. I pled guilty to a crime I didn't commit, but one that I'm 100% responsible for. And I brought death to my own family. My mother was murdered because of my drug addiction and my gangs, lifestyle. And I destroyed my family. And so I went to prison for 5 years as a result of that. And I came out of prison, and within 1 year, I was back in prison again, a full-blown drug addict again. I never solved the problem. I just stayed drug-free for 5 years. I never dealt with my underlying issues.
Sure.
My addiction at 11 was the result of friends introducing me to nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. And it was a result of divorced parents, physical, sexual abuse by a pedophile priest for 3 years, physical abuse by 2 uncles for 4 years of high school. And all of that trauma never got addressed. When I went to prison for 5 years, I was drug-free, alcohol-free, but I never dealt with the trauma. So another traumatic event happened in my life as a result of a car accident. And an emergency room doctor handed me 368 milligram OxyContin for a broken neck. I was back on drugs again. And then I went back to prison for 7 more years. So 12 years of incarceration. And when I was released from prison in 2007, I was involved in the Scared Straight program in prison. So Scared Straight, I'm sure most people have heard of it. You bring the kids into the prison to see the reality, and you scare them, you threaten them, you curse at them, you spit in their face. And it's negative reinforcement. And if you've ever worked with kids, negative reinforcement doesn't work, right? So you have to have positive reinforcement with a change of structure, a change of environment, and education, not just information. So when I get out of prison, I said, you can't scare these kids. All we could do is steer them. So I started Steered Straight to steer kids towards positive lifestyles and making good choices and good decisions. And that was 2007. And so where was I going to reach the most kids was in schools, right? So I started calling up some principals and superintendents. And I said, hey, good morning. I just got out of prison. I'd like to come talk to your kids. Hello? Hello? They hung up on me, right? Who would want the ex-convict to come talk to kids in schools about drugs? There's no one better than people like me. There's a lot of great people like me out there doing this. But unfortunately, most of the people who are speakers or go to schools to speak, they're the wrong people to be speaking to these kids. So I have a cautionary tale, and I know how to tell it. But I identify with the kids. My wife, Darla, says this because I'm so immature, but I identify with the kids because I put myself in their shoes and I show them where it all began. And I teach them to internalize it and personalize it so they can carry that cautionary tale forward and make choices and decisions so it doesn't happen to them. So now this is my 14th year. Last year, I did 708 schools, 708 schools. I'm the #1 booked school presenter in America. And March, when COVID hit and we took kids out of schools, I knew this was going to be a difficult road. So obviously, 70% of schools in America are not back to school live. 40% of the schools in America are not back to school at all. They're doing complete virtual learning, and it's causing far more damage than COVID ever will. I can prove it to anyone who wants me to prove it. We are disconnecting our children. And if you think that you can deliver and replicate what kids get in schools live with Zoom, you have no idea what kids get from school. Connection is the thread through the fabric of all addiction. And when you take connection away, you isolate people. And when you isolate people, and they don't know how to deal with their anxiety and their depression, they don't have coping skills, they don't have structure in their life. Unfortunately, we're dealing with kids in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I live. 40% of the students in this school district do not have Wi-Fi. They don't have broadband connection, 40%, okay? So thankfully, Murfreesboro is back to school live, but many families have decided out of fear to keep their kids home and not send them back to school, and some of them don't have Wi-Fi. I know parents that are picking up their assignments from schools and bringing it home and getting kids to it boggles my mind. But we're getting back to normal. We're booked. I think I have 38 trips booked from now until next spring. And in Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Idaho, Iowa, Wisconsin, Texas, and Oklahoma. So if you picked up on all those states, you kind of see where they're all located, okay? There's a reason why New York had the #1 amount of death in this country, and they're really, really, really going in the wrong direction again. We really, really, really are creating more problems and damage from coronavirus by locking the country down and failing to open up our country and not addressing the other issues. Calls in Tennessee to the Tennessee Helpline for Suicide are up over 1,000%. I work at the National Suicide Helpline 4 hours a night, and our calls are up over 1,800% across the country. The Army and the Navy are dealing with record numbers of suicides. Our suicides will be up about 20 to 30% this year. Our overdose death rate in America will be up over 30% this year. And this is going to continue for 3 to 4 years. COVID will be gone, as you said earlier, but the damage from COVID is going to be very serious. So I'm trying to educate people as much as possible. But as I said to someone this morning, the only way we can prevent addiction is to prevent addiction from happening in the first place. And we do that through prevention, education of kids, of staff, of families, of communities, of faith-based communities as well. So that's what I'm trying to do. Steered Straight is on track to, be back to normal next year, depending on who gets elected. But I just met with our drug czar, Jim Carroll, and our program was presented to Nancy DeVos, our Secretary of Education, Ben Carson, our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and they are on board. If the election goes as they plan, we'll be in most every school district in America this time next year. So
excellent. Wow. We need that so bad, Michael, and I'm so grateful for all that you do. We're passionate and moving forward about similar type things. I have a huge passion right now going on with social media. So you and I need to do another broadcast. You can talk about vaping, and I'll talk about social media. We'll tag team and get all those young people educated and equipped to make the right decisions. So I know that vaping is a very passionate topic right now for you. And I know a lot of people are just simply not educated in the areas of the level of problems it's causing. And you speak about that in the schools. Can you share a little bit about vaping and what it's doing with the kids and adults?
Well, most people believe vaping was invented to help people quit smoking, and it couldn't be further from the truth. The vaping industry is the tobacco industry. The tobacco industry, Altria, RJ Reynolds, Philip Morris, China Tobacco, UK, Royal Tobacco, they're all behind vaping. They all are, they are the vaping industry. People who vape nicotine, where does nicotine come from? The tobacco plant, okay? The tobacco industry has a horse in this race. Even if you believe, I know people who quit smoking by going on a vape, some adults, okay? I'm not going to say it's impossible that it doesn't work, but 80% of smokers who go on a vape, either stay on a vape, who either go back to cigarettes, or who do both vaping and smoking. And 94% of the COVID death was comorbid underlying illnesses, okay? And 80% of those underlying illnesses was respiratory disease. Respiratory disease. Number one cause of death in America is heart disease. Number two is cancer. And number three is respiratory disease. And 80% of your heart disease, of your cancer, and of your respiratory disease is caused by cigarettes. So my passion to educate people about vaping is to tell them the truth. But if the person is 22 years of age and older, I don't tell adults how to be adults. My passion is kids, and I don't want kids to vape. And now your states with the highest level of marijuana use is also your highest level of adolescent marijuana use and your highest level of adolescent vaping use, where you have legalization of marijuana, you have vaping cartridges and liquids and waxes in the vaping devices. There's not a vaping device on earth that you can't vape THC with. There's also not a vaping device on earth that you can't vape meth and heroin with.
Yeah.
A vaping device is going to become the drug delivery system for every drug in America. And you're delivering toxins, chemicals, and metal to your respiratory system. So you might not see the damage early on right away, but you will see the damage long term. Vaping respiratory disease will become our number one cause of death. It'll jump cancer and it'll jump heart disease by 2027, 2030. And so people say, oh, that's down the road. They're not even thinking about it. I can tell you it was just 2020 the other day. It was just 2000 the other day. Yeah. The last 20 years have been a blink in my eyes, right? And that happens in life, time flies, right? Well, we can't. I love the Chinese proverb. It says, there's two good times to plant a tree, today and 100 years ago, right? If we planted that seed 100 years ago, we'd have this big tree today. We can't go back and change 100 years ago, but what we can do is plant that tree today. And so we've got to educate kids about vaping. It is the tobacco industry, and marijuana is nothing like it was even 10 years ago, much less 20 years ago.
Yeah, when you talk about all the designer drugs and all the things that they've done, the additives and the things, just those things without, a simple plant, just the things that they put into these chemicals, you're putting chemicals, basically chemicals. And because it is so prevalent and so acceptable, you do have people using illegal drugs on a daily basis in the car next to you at the stoplight, and nobody cares, nobody notices, there's no smell or anything, they're just vaping and they're getting their hit of crank or whatever. And so, it's pretty serious, the effects that we're seeing, and it goes back to the root of addiction. And you hit on it in your testimony, your trauma. I believe that trauma is the gateway drug to everything, because people use drugs because they want to feel different. They don't want to feel pain. And so, I'm so grateful that after all those years, Michael, that you got some, obviously some counseling and some liberty and freedom from that. But so many people that we see today are hurting and they don't know how to turn. And so we, as those of us that are Christ followers, those of us that are in, trying to help bring just an education to people, but also help them break free from their chains. They've got to know how detrimental this is not only to them, but the generations that are following behind them. Because, there's a saying that what one generation allows, the next generation is going to take it to another level. And so you've seen that over the years, because you had a long, a couple decades of drug use. What did you see as far as changes over that time and acceptability now, how people are just like, oh, well, it's only drugs?
Yeah, well, human trafficking is at an all-time high right now. Childhood sexual abuse is at an all-time high right now. And, when I was growing up, I never forget the first time there was a naked rear end on TV. It was NYPD Blue. She was in the shower. He was in the shower, and we saw his backside naked. That was like unheard of, right? Now, just watch TV today and see what you see, right? So I'm using that as an example. But human trafficking and childhood sexual abuse pedophilia is rampant. I mean, we literally have people doing TED Talks and TEDx Talks talking about how pedophilia is just a sexual preference. Okay, a sexual preference. children, okay, and adults should not have sex with each other. It's not a sexual preference. It's a sickness, okay? So, we didn't have alcohol advertising on TV. There's been a moratorium. Now there's alcohol advertising on TV. I'm not just talking about beer. I'm talking about liquor, okay? That just changed 2 years ago. It was such a subtle change, people didn't even notice it. You'll notice it if you pay attention. We have liquor advertising on TV. We never had that 2 years ago. There's been a moratorium for over 50 years. We never had liquor advertising on TV. Alcohol use among adolescents is at an all-time high. We have a problem. Alcohol use among adults has jumped 27%. Alcohol sales has jumped 27% since COVID began. What do people do? They want to self-medicate. They want to escape. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they're out of their federal stimulus money. They're out of their unemployment benefits. They can't find a job. They're not back to work. They want to escape. Alcohol's an escape. It's a temporary escape, but the damage and the consequences are far greater. And then with addiction, with addictive personalities, and you start to drink a lot more alcohol, you become alcoholic. You start to use drugs. You get more drugs. You become addicted. It's deadly. And it's not just the person who's using it's affected. It's family, it's kids. So allowing these changes to take place makes the next generation, more comfortable with these changes. People don't like to hear it, but you take God out of school, you take God out of prayer out of school, you take God out of the family, you take God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. You have a godless society, right? It's definitely the answer. And I can tell you, dealing with over 7,000 to 8,000 people that we facilitated getting them into treatment over the last 10 years, people with a foundation of spirituality and a relationship with God have the best life, the longest term treatment, the lowest rate of relapse of anyone in recovery. When you have a relationship with God, you have a stronger recovery because you have a stronger foundation. And it's not just higher power, it's God, okay? And so that's the proof, So when I go into schools, I don't go in as a Christian. When I go into the prisons, I don't go in as a Christian. People say, just go preach the gospel. I'm going to go live the gospel. I see on TV every day, there's a lot of people preaching the gospel and they ain't living it. I'm going to go live it. And by living it, that's my way of preaching it. And it's an example. So we got to stop allowing. Look, if 10 months ago, you told me that there would be people in our country in elected office that would actually celebrate the murder of a fetus after it's delivered out of the womb and it's now a child breathing air, that we can still kill that baby, call it a partial birth abortion or call it an abortion. I couldn't, it boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. And you can be pro-life or you can be pro-choice. I think it's all BS. You're delivering a baby outside of the womb, it's breathing air, and you murder it, and you tell me that that's abortion? Yeah, I can't understand that. So.
Yeah, we're in a difficult place. Desensitization is huge. We've made things over the decades seem normal, and it's not normal. It is, there is so much going on and people are contending with things. And because of the internet being so readily available to young kids, they're having to deal with adult things that they're not emotionally equipped to deal with. The level of pressure that it's putting on these kids. And we go back to the escapism, which usually that is basically why everybody wants to get high. They just want to escape. They want to numb the pain. They want to make it all stop. And we have kids now that are exposed to pornography, every single minute. I had a 9-year-old several years ago that was addicted to porn that couldn't even define what addiction was. And so when we're talking about addiction, yes, Michael addresses a lot of addictive type of things of drugs and alcohol and vaping and things like that. But addiction as a whole has to be dealt with. And so if you're watching this broadcast and you're thinking, well, I'm not on heroin, or I don't snort coke or whatever, listen, check yourself, because whenever you allow your life to be opened up to things like that, it's only going to get worse, and they make these things and they've done it for years. You remember big billboards that had the beautiful woman with the car, and they've always used women to sell sex and different things, but how they made the lifestyle look so glamorous. And now we've got the music industry that makes everything look so glamorous. If you're not doing this, you're not cool. How do you address that with the kids when they're like, oh, this is just the culture?
Yeah, I think my main issue with kids is that their voice is the most important voice we have in this country, and their voice isn't being heard. I use a couple of examples. One about Florida, a school shooting at Parkman, a high school in Parkman, Florida. They had a big town hall, filled an arena with people after the shooting, and they had a couple of kids speaking. And the media would use the kids to speak, because they were selling, dirty laundry. They were getting the kids on there to get that passion and get that, sympathy and empathy. But then when it came to crafting legislation, when it came to hearings and committees, you didn't see any kids testifying, right? I tell kids, your voices got to be heard. One of the things I do, and it really ticks off politicians, is I tell kids in middle schools and high schools I ask the kids, raise your hand if you know who your senator is. And, you pretty much always you'll be surprised how many kids look around. Who's our senator? What is a senator? Some kids look, what's a senator? Okay. Who's your senator? From this state, you only have two. I don't want to go to the congressman because they have more, right? It's more complicated, but who's your senator? And so most times there's going to be a kid that's going to know one or two of them, right? And they'll raise their hand, like Marsha Blackburn, Lamar Alexander. Okay, so you know who your senator is. Here's what you do. What do you think the politicians in Washington need to hear about your generation? What's the most important issue to your generation that you don't think Washington is paying attention to? And the kids will answer. And I said, good, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Here's what you do. You write your senator a letter. Who's student body president? I get them to raise their hand. Who's on the student government? You know what I mean? Who could take this and run with it? Who could be a leader in this school? Write your senator a letter and you invite them to your school. And you say, this issue, such and such issue, we don't feel is being addressed. And we want you to come listen to our student body, talk to you, and we ask you questions about this issue and see what they say. And then I want you to contact me and tell me what they've said. And almost all the kids contact us back. And I can tell you that 50% of the time, they don't even get a response from the senator's office, right? And I love that. So I say, and I tell the kids this up front, half of the time, you're not even going to get an answer from your senator's office. Write a second letter. You must have got lost in the mail. You didn't get our letter. We want you to come to our school. Our entire student body wants to sit in the auditorium and ask you questions about this issue, that issue, this issue, right? And if they don't answer you a second time, here's your third letter. We are copying our local news channel, and we're telling them that we've written the senator 2 times and we haven't even gotten a response, okay? I guarantee you will get a response, guaranteed, right? Because the news station is going to call the senator's office and want to know why you're not going to Abraham Lincoln High School, why you're not going to Washington Township Middle School. They want to know why you're not going to go hear the voice of these children, right? And guess what? They're not going or they're not interested because those kids aren't voting. Well, the teachers are voting. The kids' parents are voting. Guess what? This is the voice of the future generation. And your voice, ladies and gentlemen, you young kids, is not being heard. This is how you get your voice heard. So almost 100% of schools and kids who've taken this on have not only gotten response from their senator's office, they've gotten phone calls, Zoom things from the senator from Washington, and the senator has gone to schools to sit and tour the school, visit the school, and I guarantee you those senators have gotten votes from that, from those administrators and from those teachers and from those parents, and they've gotten local coverage, okay? So kids have learned more about citizenship, politics, our government, and how things work. We don't teach our kids in middle school, high school about how the government works. We don't. We've got too many teachers out there that aren't showing kids how to learn. They're showing kids what to learn. They're telling kids what to learn. we have a big problem, okay? A big problem. We have to show kids how to learn. We don't need to show kids what to learn, okay? Not from the perception of our teachers and our educators, who are dramatically left to the left of center, okay? We need to be honest with our kids. So I push them to understand the importance of their voice and how they're worth it, to find their purpose and their passion. Too many kids don't hear that enough. Purpose is the reason that we journey, and passion is the fire that lights the way. And if we can show kids that, they find the purpose for their life, find more connection in their life, they'll be less likely to pick up drugs and alcohol.
That's so true. There's so much to be said about it. You know, we're launching some groups in January called Forward Groups, and they address a lot of issues. They don't go directly to that, but they do deal a lot with having confidence in who they are and who they were created to be, finding their purpose. And, you know, the more you know about yourself, the better you can prepare for your future. We've got so many kids that, you know, they're graduating high school. They've never even thought about, you know, what is my personality type, or what makes my heart beat? You know, what am I called to do? Why am I here on the earth? So these are things that we're addressing after the first year. So I get so excited when you talk about these things, because it is important. So listen, folks, you need to, if you're an educator or a decision maker in any governmental agency or whatever it is, I need you to reach out to Michael and Steer Straight, because they put a presentation on that will blow your socks off. And you will be so grateful that you invested in this for those kids that are in your sphere of influence, whether it's middle school, high school, colleges, you know, some elementaries. Listen, I'm telling you, I'm seeing kids now. We used to kind of focus on ages 13 to 17, but now it's 11 to 17, because the kids 11 years old now are doing what the 13-year-olds did before. And it's getting younger and younger. With the internet, they're exposed to way too much, way too soon. Is causing a lot of problems. They're increasingly, the dopamine is being depleted from their brain because they're getting all these, you know, hits on their likes and so forth. Their self-esteem is being ripped apart. So I'm going to be doing a broadcast where I'm going to have a panel of experts. So Michael, I want to make sure you're on there, because you know what you're talking about. So in the local Murfreesboro area, back when COVID hit, and I love how God knows the end from the beginning, because you and Darla were led to start a local thrift store, which I'm super excited about. Listen, if you're in the area, this is a great place to donate. They need your stuff, good quality stuff, so that they can keep this thing going. Michael, tell us about the vision and how that's going and so forth with the thrift shop.
Yeah, I knew very early on that they weren't going to send kids back in the spring, and I knew that we weren't going to have live bookings. So we started putting everything in virtual. So we have virtual programs. I spent spring and summer turning everything into virtual. So we have everything that we need virtually if we can't go to schools live. But I knew we weren't going to have income. I knew that Steered Straight was going to either have to shut down temporarily, right? And so we opened up a thrift store. Probably what two hoarders like me and Darla shouldn't do, you know what I mean? Because we have too much stuff anyway. But we actually filled half the thrift store with our stuff in the very beginning. So we opened up a thrift store. It's at Middle Tennessee Boulevard in Murfreesboro, Tennessee at Park Avenue. We opened up a big temporary space for 3 months until our building was renovated. And our building is done being renovated. We're starting to move in this week. So right on the corner of Middle Tennessee and Park Avenue, 845 Middle Tennessee Boulevard in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And it is massive. I mean, we have amazing stuff. We don't put up stained and ripped stuff like some of the national thrift store chains do. Our prices blows everybody's prices away, and we have such amazing stuff. And 100% of every proceed fights addiction, drug education. It brings drug education into the schools that don't have funding, and fights suicide prevention like the National Suicide Helpline. So I will say too, you know, for 9 years, I've been lobbying Congress and working with hundreds of people to try to get our National Suicide Helpline turned into a 3-digit number. 9 years. Even people who work with people, in mental health don't know the Suicide Helpline by heart. Very few people know the Suicide Helpline by heart. It's because it doesn't need to be a 10-digit number. And for 9 years, I've been trying to get it turned into a 3-digit number, 988. And finally, it happened this past year. The Senate passed it in March. The House passed it in May. Thanks to Cory Gardner in the Senate and Seth Molden in the House, Massachusetts and Colorado politicians And President Trump signed the bill last Saturday. Okay, so now the suicide helpline is going to be a 3-digit number, 988. Unfortunately, it's going to take the FCC 2 years to get it available in every community in America. That frustrates me beyond words. But we have a 3-digit suicide helpline. The old helpline will work forever. They're not going to turn it off.
Oh, good.
But by next year, all of Tennessee will be covered under the 988 number. So we're funding that. We're funding the lobbying that we've done. We're funding the fight that we've done, and we're funding the National Suicide Helpline. So every penny sold and made at our thrift store in Tennessee, and we have an online version too. We have an online thrift store, Steer Straight Thrift Store online. And we also sell our book. It's called Table Talks and Dashboard Conversations. That is one of a kind guide for parents to have conversations with your children about drugs. Not just about drugs, about all sorts of things that are underneath trauma, connection. It's only $20. You can get it on our website. You can buy it on Amazon, have it shipped right to you. But that book is a one-of-a-kind, year-long conversation guide for parents. You'll never find another book like it, and you'll use this book for the next 5 years. Whether you have an elementary school, middle school, or high school student, there's conversations in this book that you will absolutely benefit from, your family will benefit from, and most importantly, your child will benefit from. Table Talks and Dashboard Conversations. We show you the actual conversations to have with your children.
I love it. I'm so glad you brought that up because I reached over, I glanced over to my left and I seen that I had it sitting right there because I use this resource. And this is one of my, I have tons of resources from Steer Straight because I am definitely passionate about what they're doing. But this right here is like, this book, you need to get it. It's got everything that to equip you as a parent. And I don't care if you're not a parent. If you're an aunt, an uncle, an educator, you need this. Everybody needs this. This is, listen, that's what the kids need. They need to know that you care. And it's like that goes back to that saying that they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And they know that you care when you give them the time to have these tough conversations, these things that they need to talk about, they need to process. Listen, they don't need to be learning this stuff on the internet or at school. They need to be learning it from a caring adult that pours life into them. And that's exactly what Michael and Darla is all about. Michael, I want to thank you. If I could ask you, if you had one key that you wanted to leave the audience with, it can be a quote, it can be a scripture, it can be a word of encouragement. What would that key be?
Well, I mean, definitely for my life, it's, 2 Corinthians 5:17, I'm a new creation, that people like me can change and actually make a difference in the world by embracing God's purpose for their life. Yes. And I can do all things. My second favorite verse is Philippians 4:13, all things through Christ who strengthens me. So when I get down, I get discouraged, I feel like I'm not making a difference. I know that it's his purpose. It's all kingdom business. The number one piece of advice I want to give parents, guardians, coaches, teachers, administrators, counselors, anybody who works with kids, the most important thing we have to present and give kids is their purpose. We can't tell them what their purpose is. We have to give them the tools and the ability to discover their purpose for themselves. You can't discover your purpose at 40 and 50 years of age. You got to discover your purpose as a teenager, not your career, not your job. That'll change, not your major, because college students change their major 3 times, right? You have to find the purpose of your life, what you enjoy when you get up and go to work, then it's not work, okay? You find your purpose in your life and then show kids to embrace passion for that purpose. Purpose and passion for that purpose is the meaning of life.
So good. And that is what I love about. So, Michael, I want to thank you for having you on the broadcast. For all of you that are watching this, please share this out to your sphere of influence. I don't care. Your coworkers need to hear this. Your cousins, your mom, your dad, whoever, everybody, get this out. Share that. Go to steerstraight.org. Check out all of the resources available. And if you're local, make sure you donate and purchase at the new thrift store. Thank you, Michael, for being on.
Thank you.